Hello everybody, it's Jason with Modeling Pros again, and I have finished putting the neutral gray color on the bottom of the plane. So I want to go over some things about it with you. First of all, I want to show you what it looks like now that the base color of the neutral gray is on, and you can see the pre-shading still coming through. Now, whenever I'm painting a plane that I've pre-shaded, and I've experienced this with the last planes that I worked, as I'm looking at the pre-shading, I'm telling myself, I left it too dark. I didn't put enough of the base coat on to cover it up. Remember, there's no right, there's no wrong. The weathering patterns on a plane are going to look different on every one. I wasn't terribly happy with my pre-shading over here on this wing, so I put on more of the neutral gray to kind of tone it down. I was happier with my pre-shading in other places, so I let it come through more by not putting as much of the neutral gray down. If you look here behind the guns, I attempted to leave that darker. I actually left this side darker than that side, but that's okay. Again, there's no natural pattern. I was driving down the street the other day, and I actually saw the fuselage of a small plane up on blocks in a lot in DeSoto, Missouri yesterday, and it had terrible weathering all over it, and I was really fascinated by it. The weathering was very random. It was extremely dark in places, not as dark in other places. So you can see here how it has come through. When this is done, when it has had the clear coat put over this, the decals put over it, then clear coat again, then post shading, it's not going to look exactly like it does now. But I'm really pleased with the way this turned out. Now, you'll remember that I had put some blue tack down in here to protect it. I'm done with that now, so I'm going to pull the blue tack off right now, at least in one spot, and let you see that. I won't do the whole thing. I had never used the blue tack before. I told you in a previous video that I had painted these green with an enamel green. I probably should have coated that in Johnson's floor wax to protect it from the blue tack. I didn't. So I'm about to find out what the blue tack did or didn't do. I'm hoping that when I pull this out, I'll find that the green is undamaged. But you know what? If it is damaged, it's not the end of the world. I can repaint it. But perfect. Absolutely no damage to the green at all. I don't know how well you guys can see that. I'm going to dig out just a little bit more of it in this landing gear bay here, in the hopes that you guys will be able to get a good look at the green. And this is fantastic. That stuff is really good. So again, that was this Elmer's poster tack. My wife picked it up at Joann's, I believe, and I'm sure they sell it in other places too. But I don't know if you guys, how well you can see that on camera. It looks like it's coming through pretty good on camera. Looks absolutely beautiful. So absolutely no damage. I did not clear coat that green. It was not protected in any way. And this stuff right here did no damage to it. So it looks like I found new masking material that I'm going to be really liking and enjoying. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you is, you'll remember that the rear stabilizers were separate, so I painted them too. So hopefully you can see the pre-shading coming through on that as well. I purposefully left the pre-shading pretty heavy on those. To me, this strikes me as a part of the plane that's going to get a lot of wear. It's going to really show through, is my guess. And so when this goes, when these rear stabilizers go on here, you know, it's going to look like this. I think it's going to look really nice. I think I'm going to be very happy with that. So anyway, the bottom is done. Now you'll remember I told you in the previous video that I had other little parts that I was going to be painting that mount onto the bottom of this plane. And what I want to show you here is how I do that. there is a substance that you can get extremely cheap and you've all heard of that is absolutely fantastic when you're spraying these little parts like this for two reasons. Well, first of all, what is that substance? Silly putty. If you look here, you'll notice that I've taken these pieces and I've sunk them down into silly putty. Well, why did I do that? Well, let me show you. I have already painted the other side of these pieces green. Can you see that? Hopefully you can. And so when I went to paint this side of them, the neutral gray, I don't want to get gray on top of that green. So what we can do is just take these pieces, sink them down into some putty, and then paint them, and then they pop right back off. And if you do get a little bit of putty, if a little bit of putty sticks to them, it's no big deal. It scrapes off very easily. So here are these pieces that were already green on the other side, and now they're gray on one side, green on the other. So if you don't have silly putty and you're going to be airbrushing, I recommend you get some. I picked it up at a hobby store. It comes like in a little egg. It was just a few dollars. You probably buy it at Walmart and other places, I don't know. Now, well, the second reason that I use the silly putty when I'm airbrushing is not just for the masking, I mean not for protecting the other side, but just holding it in place. If you look at this, I don't have this other side painted the color that it's ultimately going to be yet, so I really didn't need to protect it. But what happens is if you lay a piece down and you begin to airbrush it, just the force of the air and paint coming out will sometimes cause it to blow away. So that leaves you holding on to it. Well, you might not want to hold on to it because you're trying to paint the whole thing. Where do you hold it? I guess you could try holding it like that. You're going to end up with painted fingers. But what you can do is just put some silly putty down and then put that on the putty and it'll hold it in place so it won't blow away. When you're done with the silly putty, you can just roll it up into a ball, put it back in its little egg, paint all over it. It's no problem at all. This silly putty's been painted probably 4 or 5 times and it's still perfect. It's still excellent for use, okay? Alright, so the last thing that I want to talk to you about is acrylic. You'll remember in my last video I said I was going to be painting this with acrylic and that I hadn't used a lot of acrylic, so I didn't know what I was going to think. I ended up going with about a 30% Tamiya X20A thinner and 70% paint in my airbrush. There was one time that it stopped coming out very well. I had to add just a little bit more thinner to it. That was pretty far into the painting process. Okay, so what do I think of this acrylic as opposed to all the enamels that I've used in the past? It came out of the airbrush really well. It went down great. Very pleased with it. The color is excellent. I really, really like the finish. And one of the reasons that people like acrylics so much is that they dry very quickly. Look, I just painted this, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes ago. It's as dry as can be. I'm touching it. There's absolutely no problem at all with touching it. So, you know, from that standpoint, it's fantastic. Now, let me tell you what I didn't like about it. The reason, one of the reasons why people love acrylics so much is they say they wash up so easily compared to enamels. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to where you can read it. But anyway, I'll just tell you, it says right here, water wash up. Well, I used water, and I used Tamiya X20A, and I used a lot of scrubbing with paper towels, and the airbrush was not that easy to clean. I find that the enamels clean up way easier with paint thinner. Now, this is my first time really using the acrylics to any extent. I might just not know what I'm doing. It's very possible that somebody could give me some hints that would help me to realize what I did wrong. But at any rate, it didn't clean up for me as easily as I was expecting it to. Again, maybe I just don't know what I'm doing. That's very likely. One last thing that I want to cover with you before I'm done, and that is if you're airbrushing or if you're taking paint out of the container, out of the paint jar in any way, shape, or form, other than with a paintbrush, I really strongly recommend you get yourself some of these pipettes. My wife gave me these, but she said they're extremely cheap. I think she said you can pick up 100 of them online for a relatively small amount of money. Anyway, what's beautiful about this is if you try to pour paint out of these jars into your airbrush or into a palette if you were trying to mix it, if you pour it, you're going to get some all down the side of this jar. What's going to happen then is you better clean it up relatively quickly. Otherwise, when you put the lid back on, it's going to dry, harden, and the next time you go to take the lid off, you're going to have a difficult time. The other problem is if you pour it and some goes down the side, you've lost paint. And these paints, you know, they're not the cheapest things in the world. Why would you want to waste any of it? So what you can do is you can just dip the pipette down into the paint, draw the paint out of it, move the pipette over to wherever it is you're going to dispense the paint. In my case, it was into my airbrush, and squeeze it back out. I've done most of my airbrushing without using the pipettes. I've got a lot of messy paint jars. I've wasted a lot of paint. I'm not going to do that anymore. So if you are airbrushing, I strongly recommend you get yourself some of these so you're not wasting paint and you're not making a mess. Anyway, final verdict on painting the bottom of this plane with the acrylic. I'm thrilled to death. I think it turned out great. I'm ecstatic that the blue tack didn't damage the green paint that was there before. Not real crazy about how the acrylics clean up, but I guess that's probably my own lack of knowledge because it's the thing that everybody else likes about them is how well they clean up. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and my next step will be to put the olive drab color on the top of the plane. And so I'll cover that with you in my next video. Thanks for watching.